it's Amy and I'm here today to do my full review of On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. This is her debut fictional novel, and this follows Evie, who has passed away, and she finds herself in a sort of limbo. And her limbo is her apartment complex that she lived in when she was 27. And she goes to her door and she puts in her key, but she finds that she can't unlock her door. And the reason behind her not being able to go through her door into her own personal heaven is she has these 3 secrets that are weighing her down. And because she has this extra weight, she cannot go through her door. And so she has to go on this journey to reveal these 3 secrets and relieve herself of this extra weight. So I went into this book fairly skeptical because I didn't know if someone that is a very amazing actress and singer and a fairly decent non-fictional writer, if that could actually translate into a really good storyteller. Because you can be talented, because a writer can be talented in nonfiction and can still write fiction, but they're not the same. They're not the same thing. And so I went into it fairly skeptical of whether it was going to be good or not. So let's talk about the things that I really enjoyed about this book. I liked that it was different. It really wasn't something that I had already read before, and it didn't remind me of anything else. And I really liked that because there's so much of the same type of story going on right now that it just gets old of picking up another story about, you know, the chosen one, or picking up another fairy tale retelling, or, you know, just other stories that just seem like they're just similar to something you've already read. And so I really liked that this was unlike anything that I've read recently, and so it made the story enjoyable because I didn't know where it was going. And I really liked the secondary characters in the story. I thought they had a lot more personality and, you know, character and life than actually the main characters of Evie and Vincent, and so I really liked the other secondary characters. And I thought that for the most part the magical realism in the story was interesting. Some of it didn't really go over well, but I thought that the attempt was actually really interesting. And something that should not have worked in this story, and that is the narrative. It's not a first-person narrative. It's not actually your typical third-person narrative. I would call it an omniscient narrative, where yes, you do follow Evie for most of the story, but when it really was convenient, where you needed to be in someone else's head to hear their thoughts, it went into their thoughts. So it was the narrative, you were mainly following Evie and her thoughts, but if you needed to hear what Vincent had to say, you heard what he had to say. If you needed to hear what the other secondary characters needed to feel and say, you got it from there. And that should not work because it's not different perspectives. You're not going strictly from Evie and then going to someone else's perspective. It's almost where you're in the middle of a paragraph. This happened a lot, where you're in the middle of a paragraph, you start out with hearing from Evie's point of view, and then you go into someone else's head, and it shouldn't work. That breaks every law of the English grammar. Like, it shouldn't work, but somehow it worked in this story. I don't think it would work all the time, but in this particular story it worked, and I just have to be like, you know, I just have to give Carrie props that somehow she made something that shouldn't work. For the most part, I liked the plot. It took about 50 to 75 pages to get into the book, but once I got into it, I finished this book in a day and a half, and so the last 2/3 of the book was definitely one that I just wanted to keep reading to know what was going to happen next. And so I think that definitely shows a good fast-paced plot, and so I liked that aspect of it. So it's not that I didn't like these things, but the main thing that I just found lacking was definitely the quality of writing. And when I say that is that I definitely can see that Carrie has talent, and she is a great storyteller, and so she has the things that even though you can teach someone how to be imaginative and to write a decent story, it will never be as fluid as someone that has just naturally is a good storyteller. And so that aspect is definitely there. It's the fine-tuning of the actual writing style that needs work. And I definitely think that she would benefit from taking, going to a writer's workshop or taking a writing style class. And not that you have to have a degree in writing or anything. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that taking, a class that's, like a couple days, or a workshop that's a couple days, that to teach her how to take a decent sentence and make it a fantastic. Because I think if she doesn't take steps to enhancing her craft, she will always be a decent writer, but she will never be a fantastic writer. And, because she used the passive voice a lot, she definitely told us a lot of the story where, she told us exactly what we were supposed to see in Evie, but never backed it up with anything that really showed us why we needed to see Evie this way. And that to me is that hindered me from actually connecting with the characters. And so moving on to that is that I just never really connected with the main characters. I don't know, I just didn't. Evie was okay, but she was just very flat, and that's really hard when she's the main character. And I think a lot of that had to do with Carrie just telling us this is who Evie is, and this is her personality, but never really backing it up with any evidence of why we're supposed to see her that way. And so that really hindered. And then I don't know, I just, without getting into spoilers, the ending, The Last Secret, I just had a huge problem with. I thought that it was very selfish, and it's supposed to be seen as beautiful and sacrificing, but I saw it as very selfish. And I don't know, I just thought it could have been done differently, and it could have been done in a way that really did show selfishness, selflessness, and sacrifice in a way that lent to hope. And so it was just odd. And then, the last thing is just the magical realism. Even though some parts worked, there were aspects of it that there were times when I thought that she was being metaphorical, but then, no, that's literal. And it didn't really work sometimes. And so just honing in what it looks like to have magical realism into your story, I think is really important. And you can't be metaphorical in one aspect of it and then be literal and expect your audience not to be confused. And so that was a little off for me. Overall, I enjoyed this story. I definitely see the potential of Carrie being a fantastic writer if she goes about honing in on the actual craft of it. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on The Other Side. Let me know down below if you have read this book, what your thoughts are on it. And guys, I hope you're having a great reading month, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye!